Mark 13. Unweaving the Two Audiences. The late afternoon library commons hummed with its usual low-frequency drone, the steady hiss of the espresso machine in the lobby, the rustle of turning pages, and the squeak of sneakers on linoleum. But at the corner modular tables, the atmosphere was distinctly strained. 6 open, crisp study Bibles lay ringed by half-empty energy drink cans and highlighted stacks of notes, all focused on the daunting text of the Olivet Discourse. Dr. Vance's New Testament assignment had been deceptively simple, yet utterly brutal. Pull apart Mark chapter 13 without losing the forest for the trees, tracking how the timeline could be both a fixed, sovereign block and a fluid stream requiring human vigilance. Caleb leaned forward, his chin resting heavily in his palms as his eyes traced the scuffed veneer surface before fixing on verse 30. If Dr. Vance uses the phrase structural mechanics of apocalyptic telescoping one more time without handing out a survival guide, I'm transferring to accounting, he muttered, a layer of sharp sarcasm masking his genuine academic anxiety. Look at the text. He tells the 4 disciples sitting in the dirt that this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. It reads like Jesus is setting a cosmic alarm clock, but the battery died 2,000 years ago. Did he go time-blind here, or are we just completely mishearing the words? Lucas sat rigidly to his right. A meticulously organized leather notebook opened to a page where he had already charted a sequential timeline in precise block letters. He isn't time-blind, Caleb. You're just flattening a multi-layered macro system because you're treating the entire discourse like a single linear highway, Lucas argued, tapping his pen against the paper. If you actually inventory the topics from verse 1 to verse 37, there's a massive structural pivot right after the abomination of desolation in verse 14. The first half of the chapter is local, historical, and immediate. It's about the Roman legions laying siege to Jerusalem in AD 70. The second half shifts the time horizon entirely into cosmic final space. The Father sees the entire unit of space-time as a single, static block where the architecture of the end is already fixed, but he communicates it to us as a fluid stream. Hannah adjusted her glasses, her fingers tracing the tiny cross-references that linked the text back to the layout of Daniel and Ezekiel. But look at the physical setting that initiated the whole conversation, she intervened, her voice pulling both guys back to the narrative psychological center. The disciples weren't asking Jesus about the end of the universe or quantum physics. They were standing outside, gaping at the sheer scale of the temple complex, saying, "Look, teacher, what wonderful stones." To Peter, James, John, and Andrew, the structural liquidation of that building was the end of their world. When Jesus told them not a single stone would be left on another, he was dismantling their entire reality, and Mark explicitly drops that massive narrator flag in verse 14, "Let the reader understand," to warn us that the threads are being braided together intentionally. The destruction of that stone temple is a local blueprint for the macro destruction of the cosmos. Exactly, because the message has to hit 2 distinct audiences at the exact same time, added Elena, a senior who had slid into the adjacent chair to audit their progress. Jesus knows the immediate flesh and blood listeners have to run for the mountains when they see the armies arrive, but he's also speaking directly to the readers holding Mark's gospel down through the centuries. If time is purely static and the script is completely unmovable, then the command to watch is just empty theater, but it isn't. The text says that for the sake of the elect, the Lord shortened those days, which proves there is a fluid, dynamic responsiveness running inside the sovereign plan. By stepping into human limitations during the incarnation, Jesus even chose not to know the exact hour, choosing to walk through the fluid timeline right alongside us to validate our need for vigilance. Caleb tracked the logic, his marker cap clicking as he stared back down at the open page. So the warning at the very end of the chapter, where he lists the timing shifts as evening, midnight, rooster crow, and morning, isn't just a generic call to stay awake? Not even close, Lucas said, leaning over to highlight the final verses. Look at the forest of the whole gospel. Chapter 13 is the chronological blueprint for the passion narrative that happens immediately after it in chapters 14 and 15. The evening is the Last Supper. Midnight is the failure to watch in Gethsemane. The rooster crow is Peter's denial, and the morning is the delivery to Pilate. Jesus is anchoring their macro-tribulation directly into the micro-events of the cross. He's shifting them from blind travelers on a road into hyper-vigilant doorkeepers of his estate, proving that whether you're watching for Roman legions or the cosmic arrival of the Master, the universal law of the kingdom remains completely unchanged. Stay alert, because the reality-altering victory is already written into the stone.